Hello, and welcome to Reward or Bribe, knowing the difference in using rewards to help your child learn. I'm Dr. Barbara Kaminski, Clinical Director of Greenbox ABA, and I will be your host for this presentation. The premise for this workshop is based on the idea that our children are wonderful little human beings who need a little bit of help with learning new skills and having desired behaviors, and that the way to help them learn new things and to set them up for success is by using rewards and changing their environment. Let's start by looking at some reasons why it's a good idea to use rewards. Well, first, the use of rewards encourages good behavior. It's a way to help your child do more of the things that help them and that help your family to thrive. Using rewards can help to increase our children's self-esteem. Nobody really likes to be corrected all the time, that feedback of just do it differently. Instead, we can use rewards to help them both learn new things, increase the behaviors that we want to see, and at the same time, increase their self-esteem because they feel good about getting rewarded and earning things. While we're talking about the idea that we can change their environment in order to help them learn things, using rewards actually lets them control their environment more. Your child will be in control of whether or not they earn a reward by whether or not they engage in the behavior that you want to see. Using rewards can help to strengthen your bond because, frankly, you're happy because your child is doing the things you want, while at the same time your child is happy because they are getting things that they like. It's a win-win situation. Finally, using rewards can lead to a happier and more engaged child who's much more interested and engaged in home life and happier about participating in it. Before we go any further, we should really define these words, reward, and then contrast them with the word bribe. So what is a reward? Well, when I talk about rewards today, I'll be referring to things that are given after a behavior occurs that make it more likely that it will happen again in the future. In behavior analysis, we talk about that in terms of first, then. First, the behavior occurs, and then the reward is given. Now, in contrast to that are bribes. In behavior analysis, when we talk about bribes, we're talking about things that are given before a behavior occurs with the promise that the child will engage in the behavior later. So we say, in that case, first bribe, then behavior. So, for example, if you asked your child to clean their room, and they said, no, I want to play the video game. No, I want you to clean your room. Oh, no, I want to play the video game. And then you give in and you say, all right, you can play the video game, but then you have to clean your room. In behavior analysis, that's what we call a bribe. As you can probably see, there are some problems with that. First of all, once you've done that, the child loses any motivation that there might be to actually follow through on cleaning their room or whatever it is you've asked them to do. And second, the child has learned that they can negotiate their way out of things that you've asked them to do. One of the questions I get often is, is it a bribe if I tell my child what to do to earn a reward? And the answer to that question is no, absolutely not. Telling your child the expectation is not the same as using a bribe. Now, if you're going to tell your child what to expect, you better be sure to follow through though, because that's a really important piece. I also want to just point out that oftentimes when we in our normal everyday lives talk about bribes, we might be talking more about a situation in which we've asked someone to do something and they didn't do it. We asked again and they didn't do it. We asked again or again, however many times, and finally we add in what we might think of as the reward. So for example, clean your room. No, I don't want to clean my room. Clean your room. No, I don't feel like it right now. Clean your room. You know what? I'm not going to clean my room. All right, I'll tell you what. If you clean your room, then I will give you video time. That sounds very similar to the first example where we said if and then. The difference is that we didn't state that expectation clearly at the beginning. If we say from the very beginning, I want you to clean your room. If you clean your room, then you can earn some video time. That's okay. If we wait and throw that in as an incentive later, after we've gotten a lot of no's, well, that's a very different scenario. I mean, imagine if you were at work and your boss asked you to write a report and you said, no, I'm not going to write that report. And they asked you again and you're like, nah, I don't feel like writing it. And then the boss said to you, well, tell you what, if you write the report, you can take off early on Friday. That's not a very good management strategy, and it's also not a very good way to encourage our children to do the things that we would like them to do. All right, so I think that we now know what a reward is, or at least what I mean by rewards when I talk to you today. So the question is, what should I do? Or what should I reward? Basically, you want to use rewards to encourage any behavior that you want your child to repeat. You could want them to play quietly or wait patiently, or maybe playing nicely with a sibling. That's a big one. Following directions, completing chores, staying in bed at bedtime, eating new foods, so many more behaviors. Basically, if it's a behavior you would like them to do more often, it's one that we can use a reward to encourage. Once we know what kind of behavior or what exact behavior we would like to reward, then we can ask ourselves, what kinds of rewards could we use? They're going to fall into a couple of different categories. The first category is social. Those are those rewards that are unlimited, are not limited. We have all the attention, well, maybe not attention. We have limited attention, but the other things, hugs, affection, praise, the always popular high five, thumbs up, clapping and cheering, and providing positive feedback that's more descriptive. I loved how you took out the garbage without my asking. Those social reinforcers, social rewards are super easy and they're super effective. The second category of rewards are what we call tangibles, actual things, physical things, items. They can include toys, books, money, stickers, anything that you actually physically earn and you get to hold on to something. I want to point out that these tangible things don't have to be new. Sometimes we fall into this trap where we think that we have to buy our kids a new thing if they do the things that we ask. We don't always have to make a target run anytime we want to reward behavior. We can use toys, books, other things like that that are already a part of the child's life just by restricting their access to them and having them earn their access. So for example, a popular one that I see parents using all the time is an iPad or other tablet. They may have to earn access to that tablet, but the parents don't have to go out and buy a brand new tablet every time. Take a look around your child's environment and see if there are things that you could use just by restricting their access to them. The third category of rewards are activities. Things like extra time on the iPad or on a video game, outings to the park, to the swimming pool, to a favorite restaurant, playing games with you, reading a story with you. Some kids totally love being able to be a helper. So if you let them help you make dinner, what kid doesn't love staying up late or some other kinds of extra privileges? Those things are also things that in many cases already exist within the child's environment. You just have to take them and use them as rewards. The fourth type of reward we're going to talk about is actually systems of rewards. So they're not specifically rewards, but they're ways in which we can deliver rewards. There are two basic kinds: token systems, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, and behavior contracts, which tend to be used more with older kids. And if you're interested in learning more about behavior contracts, you could talk with your behavior analyst. Before we finish talking about rewards themselves, one thing that's really important for us to remember is that what we use as a reward has to be motivating to the child and shouldn't be what we think is motivating to the child. We may think that every 4-year-old should love to play with trains, but if your child doesn't love to play with trains because they don't like trains, they don't have play skills, whatever the reason, then we can have them earn playing with trains, but it's not going to work because they're not interested in it. It's not motivating for them to earn it. Take some time to think about what things your child actually really likes, what kinds of things would be actually motivating to your child from your child's perspective, not from ours. One other thing to talk about before we talk about systems is that there is a potential pitfall. And that is, does your child know how to do what we want to see more of? So if your child isn't doing the behavior, it could be that they're not motivated for the reward, or it could be that they don't understand what we want to see more of. We haven't stated the expectation to them, or we haven't done that in a way that's clear to them. For example, we may have used words that are not in their vocabulary or made it sound too complicated. Or it could be that they don't know how to do what we're asking them to do. That is, they may not already have that behavior that we would like to see more of. And if that's the case, then we have to take a step back and teach them how to do that. One of the ways that we do that in therapy is through a process called shaping. You might need to break a behavior that you want to see down into smaller steps and work up to the eventual behavior that you want. It's kind of like playing hot and cold, right? Except that we're only going to give a reward as the behavior gets closer and closer to the desired behavior. You can always ask your behavior analyst for some advice on how to shape a new behavior. All right, let's switch gears and talk about reward systems. Because let's face it, giving a big reward every time a behavior happens isn't usually realistic. Not only is it not realistic from a practical standpoint, but it's not naturalistic, is it? Most people don't get some kind of reward after every time they do a thing. So one of the first steps we can take towards making that happen is through an actual intentional system. One thing I do want to point out is that eventually we want that system to go away so that we don't even have to use that to reward the behavior. But sometimes we need to start there to start to stretch it out so that we can get more of the behavior and not have to reward it quite as often. You may already have some token type system or other behavior reward system in place that was designed by a behavior analyst for you. You can also make one up for yourself at home. And the first step, and that is to identify the specific behavior that you want to reward. It's perfectly okay to just use one behavior. You could also use more than one, But if you do that, I generally recommend that you don't do more than 3. After that, it gets a little confusing, and both for you to manage the system and also for the child in terms of keeping track of what their expectations are. Make sure that you phrase things in terms of what you want them to do, not in terms of what you want them to not do. You want them to play more often with their sibling. Phrase it that way. Don't phrase it not fighting with your sibling. You want them to eat more foods. You want them to take out the garbage. You want them to clean their room. Always phrase it in the positive perspective of the thing that you want to see more of. Also, be as specific about the behavior as possible so that there's no doubt when the behavior occurs. This is especially important if there's going to be more than one person engaging in the system, but it's also important for the child in terms of knowing what the expectation is. It can be very confusing for a child if this hasn't been well defined and more than one person is involved in the system and giving rewards for different things. Going back to the idea that maybe we would want to use this to increase trying new foods. Let's say that you set up a system in which you deliver some sort of token towards a bigger reward whenever the child tries one bite of a new food. All they have to do is try it. Fantastic, you've earned a token. Now, someone else comes along and tries to implement that, and the child eats the bite, tries that first bite of a new food, and looks at the person waiting for that token. And the other person says, no, you got to eat all of that. That's not consistent, and that's also very confusing and potentially frustrating to the child. So be sure that you have a very specific definition of what you want the behavior to look like. The second step is to pick a reward. You should follow some of the tips that we've already discussed, and don't forget to make sure that it is something that will be motivating. Pick something that's big enough to be an incentive. Remember, we're going to be asking the child to engage in the behavior on multiple occasions, so it should be something that's worth their while. It's also a good idea to start thinking about the smaller step tokens or rewards that can be earned along the way. Sometimes that's just putting a token on a board. Sometimes we have to up that system a little bit and give a little small reward every time or occasionally throughout the system. Second, create a chart. Be creative and use things that your child likes. If your child likes minions, create a board chart around minions. If your child likes Minecraft, set up a Minecraft chart. Whatever kinds of things your child likes that they will want to be engaged with. Decide on how many tokens will be needed in order to get a big reward so that you can put that number, leave that number of spaces or however you're going to arrange it on the chart. It's a good idea in the beginning to only require a few tokens so that the child can become familiar and comfortable with the system, and then you can be successful with the system, and then you can eventually add in the more and more tokens in order to earn the reward. Sometimes you have to play around with it a little bit, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then set up your creative display. Be sure to put the display someplace where you can see it and where your child can see it. One of the things that can be very motivating for the child is to see their progress. So make sure that they can always keep track of where they are in the system. Don't forget to explain the system to your child. Be sure to use clear and child-friendly language so that they know what the expectation is. Oh, and I didn't say this earlier about when we were talking about picking a reward, but it's also not a bad idea to include your child in the selection of the reward that they're going to get at the end. You can do that here where you're explaining the system to your child and then letting them decide what they will earn. And then use it. Try it out. See how it see how things happen and how things progress. It may not be perfect the first time, and it isn't always perfect the first time when it's designed by your behavior analyst either. Sometimes we ask them to earn too many tokens in order to get to the big reward, or we haven't selected the right reward, or things like that. It's okay to make adjustments along the way and to try things out until we find the system that fits. Again, you can always ask for input and advice from the behavior analyst to help select the right number of tokens per system, to help select the rewards, and even to help define the behaviors for you. The most basic of the systems are those charts that we look at on the wall, and we put tokens on the chart. But there are a number of other kinds of systems that we can use. So for example, in the mystery system, you can place items inside of a closed container, for example, inside of a plastic egg. When the behavior occurs, the child gets to pick an egg and open it up and see what's inside. To make it really exciting and very motivating, some of the eggs can have larger rewards inside of them. So each time they pick an egg, they get something, but occasionally they get some bigger, more awesome thing. It's very motivating and they don't know what to expect, which is also pretty awesome. Think Advent calendar here, only in the case of an Advent calendar, for those of you who practice Advent and Christmas, in that system, you're opening the door on the Advent calendar and getting something every day just based on the fact that it's that day. In this system, you're opening, seeing what's behind that door, but it's based on you earning that by doing the behavior. A system that can be very successful for younger kids is a puzzle token system. In a puzzle token system, you use a picture of the reward, and then you cut that picture into as many puzzle pieces as you need, as many tokens as you would be using. And then when the child engages in the behavior that you want to see more of, you give them a puzzle piece, which they add to the puzzle. When the puzzle's completed, then they've earned their reward. You could also use a spell it out system. In a spell it out system, the child earns a letter that spells out towards spelling out the entire reward whenever the behavior occurs. This system not only can encourage the behavior that you want to see more of, but can also reinforce spelling. For older kids, you might want to use a reward jar. In a reward jar, you fill up the jar with something. In the example in the picture, it's a slip of paper where they have written down something that they did. It could be marbles or beans or M&Ms, who knows, you pick, right? And you put that inside of the jar instead of using a token board or chart. When the jar is filled, they earn their reward. There are so many other options. For example, you could give out reward coupons. So every time they earn something, they get a coupon towards something. You could set up a lottery system. When they engage in the behavior that you would like, they earn a lottery ticket. And then at some designated point, you draw a lottery ticket, and if they happen to have that number, they get the reward. You could set up a bingo card system, so they have to fill out the bingo card. Every time they do the behavior, they get to put something in one of the squares until they get bingo, and at which time they earn the reward. Be creative. If there's something that your child really likes, you could also do that. I've seen things like setting it up like a board game where they get to move around a track or some sort of other path in order to get to where they're going, for example. Be creative. Think about what your child likes and pick a system that will be right for your unique child. Okay, so far we've covered what is a reward versus what is a bribe, what kinds of behaviors we might want to use rewards to increase, what some of the types of rewards are, and how to use reward systems. I'm going to sum all of it up by going through some tips for effective use of rewards. The first is to make sure that your expectations and directions are clear. Once again, there's nothing more frustrating than not actually knowing what's expected or thinking that one thing is expected and having it be something else. One of the most important things is that we've defined well for our child what we expect from them, and then we expect that from them. And then when they engage in that behavior the way that we would like for it to happen, that we follow through and we do what we said we would do on our end of the bargain. If we said that we were going to provide a particular reward, that we do that. Don't forget to use lots of social praise, no matter what you've chosen as the reward. Positive attention and praise are the best possible rewards, and they're not limited by where we are or whether we can buy something or any of those other kinds of constraints. But if you're going to use praise, make sure that your praise is sincere and exciting. If I've done something really cool and awesome, I don't want to just hear, yeah, that was a good job, right? I want to know, yes, good job, thank you. Make sure that it's sincere and that it's something that's exciting for your child. Again, try to be consistent across people who might be working on changing the same behavior. And don't forget to reward the process, those small steps along the way, not just the result when we're talking about learning a new behavior. Okay. Be sure that what you're using is a reward, that it's a reward at all. Remember the example about not the 4-year-old who doesn't like to play with trains, but also that it's a reward right now. For example, if I've gotten up and I haven't had any coffee yet today, then a cup of coffee might be something I would be working to earn. However, if I just finished a Starbucks venti coffee, then I'm not going to find working for earning another cup of coffee to be very motivating, right? Even the things that we like a lot, in my case, coffee, won't necessarily be something that's a reward right then, depending on whether or not we've had a lot of it or we're just tired of it, other things like that. So you also have to keep that in mind when you're looking at using a reward in the moment. Don't let the rewards get boring. Mix things up. If you're using a token system or some other sort of reward system, don't pick the same reward every week. And if your child has a tendency to do that, give them some options to pick from that are things that they like, that they could work towards, and mix up what their options are so that they do pick new things, if not every week or whatever time frame you're using. Not every time, they're not always picking the same reward. It is very important for us to slowly shift to less frequent rewards and to more natural rewards. Of course, that is always going to be the goal. While we may have set up some sort of very intentional system in order to encourage more of a behavior that we want to see, eventually we want to get to a place where that system isn't, that very intentional system isn't necessary anymore. One of the ways we can do that is by rewarding less frequently, right? So we start out rewarding every time or close to every time, but eventually we start to back that out. So maybe every third time or fourth time or fifth time and so forth, or randomly at some point. But eventually we want to get to the point where we're not delivering the reward very often. Not only does that keep the child guessing, so they'll keep on working, but also it has the effect of letting other things in the natural environment become the rewards in and of themselves. The rewards that are actually a part of your child and a part of your child's environment, natural environment that they're encountering, are the things that become the rewards. Finally, I want to say don't put everything on a reward program. Not everything needs to be earned. It's a good idea if there's some things that we really want to encourage to put them on a system of some sort or to very intentionally reward them. but not everything your child does can or should be part of a reward program. Sometimes kids need to be kids, and they need to encounter the natural world and the natural consequences for things. The times when we do want to move into more intentional things are when we want to teach a new behavior, or when we want to encourage some behavior that's meeting some sort of resistance in terms of being rewarded in the natural environment. But you don't have to have everything on a system. I'm not worried about that, frankly, because I can't even imagine the person who has enough time to put every single one of their child's behaviors on some sort of a system. That's unrealistic, and I can't even imagine who has the time to do that. But I also wanted to make sure that you knew that that's not a thing that anyone is shooting for. All right, so sort of to just wrap up some of the main points. If you're teaching a new behavior, start small and start easy, and make it so that the child can easily be successful. Set them up for success. Be consistent. Be consistent in what you're expecting, and be consistent across people. Don't use bribes. That is, I don't use the "I will give you that now and then do what I want." And also don't use that later entered incentive after you've hit some resistance. Be the one in control. You get to be the gatekeeper of when something is delivered, and you're the grown-up, and it's okay for you to do that. And don't forget that old saying, because it's an old saying, but it's a true saying. When your child does something awesome, let them know. So even if it's not on some intentional system that you're setting up, something that you've set aside to reward, even when you see something else and it's something awesome and it's something you would like to see more of, let your child know. If you have any questions about the material that was covered in today's presentation, feel free to reach out to your behavior analyst and ask your questions, or you can reach out to me directly through the Greenbox main office. I'm so glad that you took the time to be with us today for this presentation, and I hope that you learned something that will be useful and that will help your child learn and be successful. Thank you, and have an awesome day.